understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.
Welcome to another episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. My name's Anamdi Oswagu. I'm the host of the Tech Behind FinTech. Joining me is Brendan Groove, CTO and co-founder of Prizeout. How are you today, Brendan?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing a little under the weather, but I'm a lot better today than I was yesterday, so that's progress.
Sure, it'll be good for the weekend.
Yeah, you know how that goes. So today's show title, Future-Proof Finance, Navigating Legacy Tech and Modern Banking. Before we jump into the topic, I want to do some housekeeping, and then I'll read Brendan's impressive bio. We are streaming live from Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitch. We also have a stream going from Instagram on the personal cells. So if I look this way, that's to my Instagram people. But if you want to comment, please drop a comment on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, or Facebook, and we'll add it to the show. Once again, when you comment, you can ask questions, you can give your insights, all acceptable. We love them. So without further ado, let me get into Brendan's bio. Brendan is a co-founder and chief technology officer at Prizeout, where he leads the tech and data teams. A mechanical and software engineer by trade, Brendan's programming career took off at DraftKings, where he was instrumental in bringing programming, data science, and data analytics together to build data products that drove consumer personalization and operation automation. He is passionate about team building, data, and as a former collegiate from Washington University in St. Louis, enjoys a lot of his deep thinking and talking calls while hitting the pavement. Good stuff, Brendan.
I didn't actually write that. So whoever did thinks highly of some of the things.
You didn't write it, but you did it. So that counts for something, right?
I'd like to think so. And I actually brought a lot of the data or some of the key people from the data team from DraftKings over to Prizeout to help bring that type of technology into the credit union world.
That's very interesting. You know, I think it's fascinating, you know, going from DraftKings, and people don't know, online gambling and booking to go into FinTech. How was that transition?
Yeah, so our product actually started in gaming. So it was a gaming payout option. Our CEO, David, was running a company called Fleetwit, which did online paid trivia. So me versus you, I think I know more about podcasting. We do a trivia race against each other, and winner would win money. And so what would happen from there is that people needed a way to withdraw. So gift cards was one of those payout options that David used for his company. And so on one side, he was paying to acquire users. On the other side, he was giving them for free, essentially, to Uber, Amazon, DoorDash, Domino's. And that's where he hatched the idea for bringing marketing into payouts through gift card. And so I was introduced to him through a mutual connection who worked at DraftKings with me. Both of us went over to help co-found. So we actually went from gaming to gaming, and then we found our way into credit unions and FinTech as a company after that.
So, you know, working with credit unions, and you mentioned, you know, definitely in that space, we see a lot of legacy technology being used, right? So what are some of your strategies for modernization?
Yeah, I think one thing that we focus on a lot as a technology team is, are we delivering value? So are we driving products that add value to members' lives, and then therefore the credit unions' bottom lines, and the credit union experience, right? Credit unions are nonprofit. They care about driving member experience. And so that's kind of the focus there. So they do have a lot of legacy technology, right? So some of the cores have been in use since the early 1960s. Right? You see members who are 90, 100 years old, who've been with the same account on the same credit union for all that time. And so for us, we have to try to take modern gamification, modern technology, right? And make sure it works with the technology that they're using today. You can't just throw your hands up and say, like, well, if it was different, we could build a better product. We have to figure out how to build the better product.
No, that makes a lot of sense. What are some of the challenges you see in that space?
Credit unions in general.
Yeah.
I think it's fragmentation. So I think that credit unions are highly collaborative, which makes it really fun for us to build. We have 20 founding members right now that invested and are partnering with us, and then more credit unions signed overall. And so they're collaborative in the sense that they want all credit unions to have this technology, but they're fragmented in the sense that they're all running different tech stacks, and not entirely different. Like once you integrate with 10, 15, 20, you start to see the different pairings. But one might be Alchemy with Scimitar backend. One might be Q2 with Fiserv DNA. One might be, Nimbus core and Nimbus front end. And so it's just, how do we figure out how to create this one consistent experience across all of these different flavors of integration and flavors of technology?
It's been a while, but I interviewed someone who worked at a credit union, and you know more about this than me, because I'm going to totally mess this up. But it's called, when you are a partnered with a credit union, it's a CUSP or something like that, in which you're certified to work with credit unions or something like that.
Yeah.
Do you remember that term?
No, I don't know the term, but I do know that you need to also be certified with each online banking provider as well. So you go through like an Alchemy certification process, you go through Q2 certification process.
Yeah.
And so that we've had to do across all of the ones that we're live with as well. And just make sure that we're actually building something that works. And I think the other part of credit union is they know their members better than most companies know their consumers. But they don't always have fully staffed technology teams. Some credit unions are a single branch, right, in Oklahoma. And so, yes, they want to bring all that value to the members, but they're not JP Morgan, and they don't have, what did Jamie Dimon say recently? They spend billions on technology every year and innovation. Yeah. Credit unions, a single credit union doesn't have that type of power, but combined credit unions do. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to work on here, is help them bridge that gap and help them compete with the bigger banks.
That's awesome. And just so specifically with Prizeout, you guys only work with credit unions?
We work with community and local banks as well. But our main focus is credit union right now. And our main roadmap focus is credit union, both because of the partnerships, the speed at which they're moving with us, and then also the investment. So it's a very, very deep partnership on the credit union side versus a standard partnership on the banking side.
So, like, besides on the core banking, because you mentioned a lot of core banking technologies, what other, in fragmentation with their technology stack, what are some other challenges that you see in that space?
Yeah, well, I can talk about two. So I feel like because of some of the challenges, Steve Jobs start with the consumer experience and then work backwards to the technology, right? Like figure out what you actually want to build and then kind of, figure out how to build it. I think that where we've gotten to recently is that. So on the online banking platforms, we have a tile that lives on the homepage. So you see your checking account, you see your, savings account balance, and then you see Cashback Plus, and that's what the product is called. And it's a way for users or members to earn cashback. And so when you live on the online banking homepage, you need that tile to look different for every single credit union. Because you want it to match their colors, you want it to match their theme, you want it to match the way that their checking and savings account balances look, right? How did they have is there colored on the left? Is it rounded edges? Like, what do the buttons look like? What does it look like as the screen sizes change? Is it different on app versus web? And so that's one of those pieces of technology that it sounds very trivial in isolation. You're like, yeah, you're putting a tile on a homepage. But for us, what we want to do is we don't want to take the easy way out and just say like, it's a button, they'll click through. It's going to be unique to us. We want it to feel like the credit unions, because we want, ultimately they're the ones that own the product, and want to push it with their members. So we spent a lot of time, a handful of months, making that incredibly customizable, right? So it's going to look like the credit unions. It's easy for us to change. It's easy for us to update. Ops can do it, right? It doesn't have to be a technology change. So it's just like one of those small things that feels easy, should be easy, is not easy, but hopefully we've made easy. And I think we've done that on the online banking. We've done that on the core side. How do you get a new provider live? Do they want a VPN or they want to do OAuth? Like, right, there's a ton of different ways to integrate to these systems, and you just want to make it as plug and play as possible for each credit union.
No, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. When you start looking at credit unions and you start working with these different banks that have maybe outdated technology, with your experience with data science, data analytics, how have you leveraged that in these situations?
Yeah, I think it's all about, data science at its core. And I think the word data science takes on many different meanings at different companies. If you say you're a data scientist at one company, it could mean something entirely different at another company. It's all about creating configurable cores that are testable and easy to modify. So we like to think of these foundational pieces of information, because I'll use an example of like a recommender system. If I'm going to try to recommend to you, Netflix shows you the best shows, or they show you the shows that you might like. If you create and this is my opinion of data science, so take it with a grain of salt, is if you create an algorithm that takes in user data and spits out shows, and it works, and it's black box, like everybody's really happy. That is usually not what happens, right? It's going to spit out something that doesn't make sense, or that someone wants to modify in a certain way, right? Well, it's Valentine's Day right now. And there's things you can do so that it automatically picks up, it knows it's Valentine's Day, but humans, and especially marketers with these data science technologies, a lot of times want to be able to tweak them a little bit, right? You want to leave the core intact, but you want to be able to mess with it a little bit. So I think what I've learned there, or what we worked on there, is how do you create something that works elegantly with different inputs? So the inputs might change it ever so slightly. It's going to change the output, but you kind of know every step along the way. Is it working, right? Is it drifting? How do I evaluate that this works, then this works, then this works, and then ultimately the shows that's recommending make sense? And I think we've kind of built our technology for credit unions in the same way. Everything has a purpose. And it's not always that you're splitting the services from a technological standpoint. You're splitting the services from both a technological and business need. So it's not just as pure as just saying it's easy technology for technology's sake. So that's kind of probably the thing that I picked up on that we use here.
No, and then, like one of the things you mentioned, you're dealing with credit unions that may not have a dedicated technology team. They may have a lot of third parties managing their tech stack and so forth. So when you're coming with like all these data science principles, or introducing AI, like you said, recommendation systems and so forth, that must be like totally nuanced to them. So, how does that communication usually go when you try to introduce these concepts to them and you're dealing with non-technologists? Like, what's your approach with that?
Yeah. I think one of the examples is probably just the ranking system that we have today. When the user comes to the app, we're going to show them their best cashback offers. What does best mean? And I think this is like probably one of the key examples of what you're talking about, is what does best mean? And I think that for one credit union, best could be best local deals. For another credit union, it could be the things people buy most often, right? For one, it could be whatever is most popular in the area that user is. And for some, they want to, pick it each week, right? Maybe we change the top of carousel. And so I think for us, if you can explain it in a way that makes sense to them, it's going to be explained to a way that makes sense to the member, and also gives that type of configurability, right? It's one algorithm that's creating a ranking. It's just how much do we want to weigh certain inputs? Do you want to filter things out? Do you want to add things in? If you're doing a hybrid recommender, should it be more content-based, more collaborative-based? And I think that if you give that kind of tuning ability, it actually goes pretty smoothly with the credit unions.
That's awesome. It's like I heard a term recently. I think Jeff Bezos, he said something like be like static with the vision. I'm totally misquoting it. I don't have the exact words I remember, but basically be firm on the vision, but be flexible on the details.
Yeah.
And it made so much sense to me. So it seems like, from what you're doing, it's like, okay, well, here's the vision where we want to get you, whether you're recommending the recommendation systems and doing things. The details may change with the different credit unions you have to work with, because their technology is different, people's different, what they some of the end results, what they want is different. So that's what that reminded me of, as you just mentioned that.
It's a good quote. I'm gonna have to write that down. I think quotes are great because they simplify what you want to say in a short amount of words, and it's usually from someone much smarter than yourself or myself. I think there's one I saw recently that was, we may not be right, but at least we're clear. And I think it's kind of the same idea, right? Like, I'd rather users say, I get the product, I don't want to use it, right? Than say, I don't know what this product is. And so I think that, you have that idea as well. We're going to be clear in the vision. We're going to deliver cash back to members. And like you said, we're going to be flexible on, how it gets delivered, through what brands, through what mediums, but we're going to deliver cash back.
No, I think that's awesome. I mean, when you think about it, because, and you have an extensive technology background, as do I. And I know sometimes I've always hated and you probably experienced this, right? It's like, you could work with someone who's really good at this one technology. So what they say is, if the hammer can solve all the problems, then this guy's always going to bring the hammer. And they're just not as flexible with and they'll argue to death about this one thing because that's what they're proficient in. But something totally new is like, oh no, we're not going to do that. And it's not because the new suggestion is bad or whatever, just because I don't really know it and I don't want to go in that direction. So I always love the idea of looking at technology like from a creative standpoint as opposed to a scientific standpoint. And when you look at it from a creative standpoint, it's like, well, our goal is to paint this picture. And, we don't know where it's going to go. We don't know, but we know at the end of the day, we want this kind of picture, and then we could be creative with how we get there. And from early on, that's what I fell in love with. So, when I heard I like what you just said too, just be clear on like, this is what we're doing. And you know what? And if that clarity is conveyed, it might not be for you, but at least you understand what I'm doing. And it might be for someone else. You might not be my target market. And that's fine, but you're not confused about what I'm trying to do. So
I love the when all you know is a hammer. When all you know is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I think too, technology, and you're right, is you need carpenters, or you need people that are really good with certain tool sets to say, okay, this tool set is a hammer. This one is a screwdriver, right? When we're looking at this problem, which one should we use? And I think that same thing happens with legacy technology. There are limitations. That's just the reality of it. But everything has limitations, right? Like everybody's always like, oh, if only we had this technology, this wouldn't happen. Like, every technology has limitations. So I think sometimes people use the legacy side of it, or tech debt, as a way to say they can't do something or that we shouldn't do something. But in reality, no matter what we do, like, you're never going to go back to a piece of code you wrote and think it's good, right? You're always going to be like, why did I do that? Like, why did I pick that variable? Like, that seems like a weird way now that I have more context to organize the code base. So like, it's more of an excuse I think people use as to why you can't do something than a reality of how do you figure out how to make it work with that.
I mean, it's that part, it's the figure out part. I read a stat in preparation for the show that 40% of banks still use COBOL, right? And I was like, wow, I didn't even realize that. I mean, and I come from a security background, so a lot of the problems, just for the audience, right? When you use legacy systems, and when we say legacy, I mean they're basically outdated. You can't patch them. So a lot of security issues that we see is just based on, okay, someone found a security issue. There's a patch that's going to be put out. We're going to patch it. It's going to be secure. But what happens when you're involved with a legacy system that no one's supporting, that has a whole bunch of open vulnerabilities that can't be patched, and that creates a huge security risk? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think we're lucky on the security side because our technology is modern. So, from we are interfacing with their technology. If there was like an issue with their core, right, that would be unfortunately theirs to solve. I do think it's a huge issue. It's definitely one that is probably going to pop up more and more as some of these scammers get more and more sophisticated and hackers get more sophisticated. I think one thing though that we see, and it's not security related, is there's certain issues at times that are unavoidable, right? Like there are going to be times that when we try to move money against the core, it fails. It's just not going to be 100%. And it could be because it timed out. It could be because it failed. Whatever the case. And would a more modern technology have less issues? Probably, right? And so I think in a situation like that, it's kind of what you're saying. You can throw your hands up and say, well, nothing we can do about it. Or you can try to make the best member experience, understanding that might happen, right? You can take all the precautions to make it not take place. And then there's just something that you have to do to make it easier for the member to navigate after that.
Can you do me a favor? Because I know we mentioned this term, and I take for granted that others may know this term. You mentioned core a lot. Can you explain what a core means in terms of banking for audience members that may not understand?
Yeah, good question. So the cores, a lot of times, just the ledgers of their system. So it's just the database that runs the accounts and the transactions. And so it's kind of the source of truth of what your balance is at any given time. So that's the core. And then the online bank that sits on top. And some providers will offer both a core and an online bank, but many will be able to mix and match. So you can use one online bank from a different provider as the core of your ledger system. So if you hear about core conversions or you hear about online banking conversions, one is changing the front end, and one is actually changing the underlying ledger itself. And both can be quite complex, as you can imagine, because there's so much that you'd have to roll over, but keep consistent, right? If you change your online banking provider, members don't want their bill pay they set up to go away. So you're trying to how do I make this conversion, or how do I do it right? And then cores are obviously even more complex than that.
No, thanks for that. So but before we went into that problem that you mentioned, in which you because of the legacy tech, and you're submitting this, and a transaction may not register to their core, what happens in that scenario?
Yeah, so kind of the same thing that we built out on the gift card side, because it's the same thing, right? Many of the gift card systems have been around for a while, and they work, but you're not gonna point of sales. I don't know if you've ever worked in point of sales, but if you're trying to change the way a grocery store chain, runs their cash register, it's just not going to happen, right? It's going to take a really long time. You'd have to do each one individually. So a lot of times in the gift card world, the same thing can happen, right? You go to fetch a digital code and maybe it doesn't work right away. So what we've built is a system of retries and obviously making sure that, if you think something went through, you're actually able to check if it did right away, right? Because if I try to make a transaction against the core it either worked, I got a response back, I know it worked. It didn't work, I got a failure back, I know it's a failure. Or the third is, I don't know. Something happened, it blipped, no response. And so in that situation, what you don't want to do is just either assume it failed or assume it worked. You need a way to then check, does this transaction exist, right? Fetch against the list, check the user's transactions, see if you see the transaction before you take the next step. So we kind of use that same idea, both when we're moving money from us to merchants through a gift card and when we're moving money between us and the merchant, us and the credit union. Because we're using their systems, right? We aren't the actual money transmitter of any of these, but we are orchestrating or kind of asking credit union, can you move money? Yes or no? And then asking the gift cards that, can we actually move this money? Yes or no? And going from there.
When you were talking, it reminded me of when I was younger, I used to play a lot of Monopoly. And I remember the one card you get bank error in your favor, collect $500. And this reminded me of that when you were talking about like resubmitting, and you can't assume either, right? You have to get that verification. So that's very important.
Yeah, and we'd like no bank error, because that would be our fault, and we want to avoid that, obviously.
In bringing up a lot of legacy stuff, when we start talking about modern technology stacks and leveraging the cloud, whether you're AWS, GCP, or Azure, leveraging APIs and so forth, application programming interfaces, for just spelling it out for people. How does that work when you're integrating with these credit unions?
Yeah, so some credit unions are actually, their cores are now cloud-based. But I would say that the majority of big credit unions, at least right now, still have physical servers. And so as we work through integrating securely with these connection points, it's a big conversation of how do we, and this is one of the big things we worked on last year, is how do we go from our GCP instance to their physical server with a secure VPN connection. And so for some, it's through that connection. Others will have kind of API interfaces against the core that they want their fintech vendors to plug into. Example of one of those would be something like a MuleSoft. And so, you're going through an API where they have, some additional controls. And then others have built their own. So someone like a Suncoast or a Golden One, they've built their own API interface, and they have their own security layer because they don't want, fintech vendors going direct VPN to their core. So you kind of see the whole range of flavors. And that's kind of what we were talking about before, is how do you let them dictate, and how do you plug your system flexibly into however they want to authenticate, however they want to authorize, and make sure that the security is good across all of it.
So the three flavors that you see, you have on-prem, which they have the physical server, so you use a virtual private network to connect directly with your GCP instance. You have another situation where they have their core, and they're leveraging a third-party API provider like MuleSoft that'll create all the APIs for them, so you could connect directly there. Or the third option, in which they create their own APIs that you connect into. Those are the three scenarios that you see.
Yep. Yeah, and on the I guess on all three, there's also are they using a provider? So Jack Henry recently, or not recently even, at this point, rolled out that you can they'll host via Jack Henry Ease, it's called. They'll host the core for you. So in that situation, we're doing a secure connection against another cloud-based core versus the on-prem. And so that's kind of a slight variation on all of those as well.
When you're dealing with, because so many different, as you mentioned, right, the majority now are going cloud-based, whether it's on their own or through a provider. When you're dealing with someone, an organization that still has physical servers on-prem, do you find that more challenging?
No, not necessarily. I think it really depends. If you think about it in a different way, it's all about how do you work with the credit union to find out who has the information and the skill set to help create the connection in a secure way. So if they are cloud-based internally and they're using Jack Henry, sometimes that might be a smaller credit union, right? So they're like, well, I know that I have the relationship with Jack Henry Ease, and I will help facilitate that relationship for you to plug in, right? So that can be easy, that can be hard, right? Depends on the level of service, depends on the account management, depends on this particular credit union employee's knowledge of the cloud. Maybe they were just put in charge of it because they get put in charge of everything, and it's a small credit union, and maybe they don't know it as well, right? Which is totally fine. So it's just we all get on, we figure it out. If they're on-prem, a lot of times they have, internal security teams, internal technology teams. And so sometimes while, a VPN is going to be more challenging to confirm setup versus, a cloud-based API, it can be easier to find the person that knows the information to help get it across the line. And so that's where we've seen all different variations of that. And it's actually pretty fun. I think I told you credit unions have been, so we've been in 11 industries because the technology can work across all of these different payouts, like anywhere in which the user's holding money. But we consolidated that down to really focus on just gaming and credit unions, which are the two that we found the most traction in. But across all those industries, credit unions have been the best partners to work with because they truly care about their members. They're truly collaborative, and they're great people. So that when you're on a call for an hour testing VPNs, that can sound awful or it can be fun. And we find with our partners, it's actually pretty fun. And there's downtime, right? You're just sitting there spinning up and, are you just going to hang out? And I think we find that they have interesting lives. We talk about it. It's a pretty good time.
That's pretty cool. I mean, that's the one thing, right? When we tend to always talk technology, but when you integrate and have to build these types of connections, you're working with somebody on the other side and you're building that relationship. So it's almost, for that period of time, he's a coworker because you have to kind of work together to get this thing across the board. And when you have someone who's committed to it, it makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, it's kind of when you share the same vision too. Bring it back to the clear vision part. We're trying to give cash back together to their members. Like they're excited, we're excited. We're going to find a way to figure this out. It never feels like it's just dictated by the CEO and everybody else, at the other organization has to do it. We find that they're genuinely excited about doing the work and doing the integration and dealing with all the hurdles that come up, right? With whether it's old technology or new technology, no integration straightforward. Like that doesn't happen. So it's just about when problems arise or when hurdles pop up, are you solving it together? Are you a partnership or are you trying to blame each other? And we found partnership, which I think we're lucky. We're lucky to have that.
I mean, if you start thinking about it, right, that can be part of, the formula for working with different organizations like credit unions that have legacy tech when you're trying to modernize it. I think in this conversation, we touched on that, the vision. It sounds like, regardless of where your tech stack is in terms of whether it's legacy, modern, but if you share the same the vision and everyone on board understands that vision, that integration and modernizing it can make things go a lot smoother.
Yeah, it's almost like a marriage or a relationship where like you're gonna mess up, like you just are, and you're not perfect. At least I'm not perfect. And I think that if the other person loves your flaws and you're working on it all together, it works really smoothly. Like you also have to know what you're an expert in. So for credit unions, like they are going to know their cores better than we ever will, right? They're going to know their members better. And at the flip side, they know that we know our cashback product and we know our technology better. And so when you bring our best selves to the partnership to solve a common problem, it works really nicely. But there's never like a blame game going on. And I think it's the same thing in a successful partnership is the relationship. You're doing the same thing, right? You're going to make a mistake, but that's okay. We're in this together. We're going to figure it out together. And I think that's how you have to work with different tech stacks, with different teams as well.
So, in looking at all the integrations that you have done, can you think about like one in particular that was just like a really like great story that it made you go like, wow, this is really cool?
Yeah. Let me think of a good one. I think that the hardest integrations that we did are the first ones, because we were so naive when it came to what would integrated and getting live look like, right? Because I can use examples with Alchemy or Q2, and we have these two partners. We had Stanford Credit Union with Q2, and we had Patelco and Idaho Central on Alchemy. And I was sitting there, and they're all three of those are investing members. And I was like, oh, like we should be live in a couple of months. Like it's not going to be that bad, right? We looked at the docs. We had the code spin up locally. Like we just thought like, oh, this would be a breeze. And it was anything but that, but not because of anybody's fault, right? There's no like malicious actor. It's just hard to get live the first time, right? There's hurdles we didn't know about. There was, oh, wait, you need to submit this form to this portal. And we're like, oh, we should have done that a month ago, right? It's going to take 3 weeks to process. And so I think there was just so much that went into actually getting live that we didn't anticipate. And so our partners could have looked at that and been like, you guys don't know what you're doing. It was the opposite. They were like, cool, like we're happy to be the guinea pigs. We're going to work this out together. Like no big deal. And so as we went through it the whole time as CTO, I was like, are we doing okay? Like, do they like us? You're so worried that you're making a mistake. You're second guessing yourself. And when you finish and they looked back, and some of the partners have said this, they said, you guys were one of the best, if not the best to work with.
Wow.
It means something more when you go through what we went through, right? It wasn't like we just integrated, turned on, and it worked. And I think we're getting closer and closer to being able to do that because we've learned and we've gotten better. But when we hear those quotes, it's actually not because it was easy, not because it was just perfectly smooth. And I think those for us are more meaningful because it means that, I think we did something right, even if we weren't always perfect on the technology side.
But that's awesome. I mean, that is awesome. Like when you think about it, I interviewed someone last year, and he said, "Don't ever apologize for technology. It's technology. Why do you think you could apologize for technology?" He was like, "Don't.
Yeah,
it's really complicated stuff. We're moving forward. We're trying our best, and we're going to figure it out along the way, and we're going to make it work." And I think that boils down back to what we said earlier. If you share the same vision, and I think that's really what it starts to that keeps echoing back.
Yeah, I think something else that you just reminded me of is I've said for a bit now. I think the difference between a great engineer and a good engineer at a startup is simply giving a shit. Like, do you care? Do you want the business to succeed? And that's probably actually what some of the credit unions, when we worked through with them, is like, we care. We care about it working. We care about their members liking it. We care about them wanting to work with us more, and we care about figuring it out together. And I think that you can't fake that, right? Just like with a great engineer versus a good engineer, like you can't fake whether they want the business to succeed and whether they really truly care about what we're trying to do. So I think you're right. It's a shared vision, but it's also, it's impossible to fake buy-in to a shared vision, right? You're either bought in both sides and you're working towards it, or you're not. And I think credit unions can sniff through that as well pretty easily.
No, that's pretty awesome. You know what? I think that's a good segue to like I like that. I like it. If there's any way to end a show is on that, and I think that's a really good jewel that people can take as an engineer or any technology role that you happen to play in this technology space or in a startup space or whatever. It's like, do you actually care? You can't think that. I think that is awesome. What we like to do at the end of our show is to give our guest time on the screen alone to talk about your company, talk about people can find you and so forth. So I'm going to get off screen and give you that time.
Okay. Fun. Unprepared for this. So what we do at Prizeout, and especially we talked a lot about the credit union space, so I'll focus on that, is we build cashback programs for credit unions. So we're hyper-focused on how do we build a specific member experience that resonates with the credit union and with their member. And we build a cashback program that works for them. So that can be done through offers. So our gift card offers. It can be done through rewards. And we have more products rolling out to make it so that it's easier to earn cash back through your credit union. So that's a big part of what we're working on. We're live with about 30 credit unions right now across 4 or 5 million users. And we have more cores, online banks onboarding, online banking platforms onboarding over the next handful of months, as well as new products rolling out that we're really excited about, that our credit unions are as well. Located in New York and, looking for great talent as well. So if you're interested in joining the mission and trying to help credit unions compete, just email me at brendan@prizeout.com. And if you're a credit union looking to build a great member experience, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to work with you and get you onboarded.
Sounds great. So also, I'll send you an interview I did with another credit union person offline after we finish. I think you'll like it.
Awesome.
In your space. So, guys, thank you very much for tuning in. I want to thank my guest, Brendan, for his time today. As you all know, you can catch us at Tech Behind FinTech. We're live every Friday, 12 p.m. If you go on techbehindfintech.com, you can click the subscribe so you're never left out. We will be launching our new platform in the next few months, so we'll keep you updated on that as well. Once again, thank you all for viewing. Thank you for your time, and have an excellent, great weekend. Cheers.
Bye.
Understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.